And some of them say, well, I was sort of tired or grumpy. I really didn't want to be here. Some of them. And then say, okay, everybody, what mood are you in now? Everybody's in a good mood. So I say, look, that's the magic. That's magic. I mean, look, you were in a bad mood. You just changed it to a better mood in a matter of like 30 seconds. So that's what this module is about. It's about how can you change your relationship to your emotions so that you're in better moods more of the time, bad moods less of the time, and neutral moods is fine. You can be in neutral moods plenty. And so you want to decrease the frequency of really painful, intense emotions and increase the intensity, decrease the intensity of them, and decrease your vulnerability to get into them. Notice that this is the other module about emotions. The other one is distress tolerance training. And notice that they are radically different modules with different points, you might say. Distress tolerance training is to give you a group of tools to accept reality, bad realities sometimes, and give you concrete tools for getting through the moment without making things worse by acting on some intense negative emotion. So tools like distracting for the time being, or self-soothing, or stopping, using the stop skill, etc. Okay? This one is really different. This is really like toning up your emotion regulation system, modulating emotions better, letting emotions flow, but flow in a way that you have a little more control over, and flow in a way that's less painful. So this is really an allowing model for emotions, whereas distress tolerance is more of a temporarily move aside or shut down. Okay, so we would prefer to use this more of the time than distress tolerance, that's for sure. All right, so emotion regulation training. That was one way I might start it with a group, just as a demonstration and just to get their attention. Another way I would sometimes start it would just be to say, hey guys, does anybody here have any problem with emotions? And of course, you get a number of people laugh and you say, yeah, I was just kidding. Of course, that's why you're here. So you know what, let's have a conversation about emotions. And then just have a 10-minute conversation about emotions, asking, what kind of problems do you have with emotions? Like, what are your favorite emotions? What are your worst emotions? And what you're doing basically is creating a vocabulary in the group and a comfort zone. You're breaking ice about talking about emotions, developing a language for emotions. So that's another way to get started, and there's many others. Now, on to the manual, and what are you going to teach? Remember always with these tapes, this is an intro to the things you teach, and maybe a few tips on how to teach them. This is no substitute for the manual itself, which has so many more tips and explains everything, or for other online skills training that goes into each skill in great detail. But I want you to get the overview of some skills here. And so we're in emotion regulation, and as usual, there'll be there'll be more skills than you can teach in any one group. So we're going to go through the main ones that Linehan would usually expect you to teach in a standard skills group of about 6 weeks with emotion regulation. So handout number 1 from the manual is this, which is to go over what are the goals of the module, which is what are the goals of emotion regulation. And as you can see, hopefully you've got your book in front of you, or you've got my PowerPoint on this topic. The first of 4 is understanding and naming emotions. I'll go over those, but really that's just that how can you go into this without understanding emotions? I mean, there's a couple of tips to give you or points to make that affects the whole module that's not necessarily taught in any one segment. So let me just say right now, emotions are multi-component responses. There's nothing simple about emotions. They involve many domains of functioning happening at once, physiologically, neurophysiologically, in the brain, in the face, in the words, in the actions, in the thoughts. Basically, it's a multi-component immediate response to a trigger or cue, a prompting event that sets off the emotion in us and accomplishes many things. It causes many things to happen all at once. And we're going to talk about what the functions are. But to understand what they are is a really good start. We have a model for emotions we're going to teach, and names of emotions, and functions of emotions, and myths about emotions, etc. Then the second goal is to decrease the frequency of unwanted emotions. You know, how do you cut down on the amount of pain you're having because of the emotions? And that would be to both help stop them from happening in the first place, as well as to cut down on the negativity and intensity of them once they're in you, activated. The third one is to decrease emotional vulnerability. So what's that? That's all of those factors that are there pre-emotion, if there is such a thing, pre-emotion, because there's that make you more vulnerable. You know, things having to do with how you've been eating and how you've been exercising, how you've been sleeping, what medicine you're taking, how you're taking care of your physical health, whether you're engaging in things that make you feel a little bit of mastery every day, and how you cope ahead with things. There's a variety of things that affect your vulnerability in a given situation. So we're going to go over those to decrease your vulnerability, or on the other hand, to increase your resiliency. And the final goal is going to be that once emotions are in place, how to decrease the amount of emotional suffering you have when painful emotions are in you. What can you do? Okay, so that's handout number one. It had a star. Handout number two has no star. Well, does that mean you would teach it? Well, I think this just, for our purpose, you may or may not. You can decide that. But for our purposes, handouts number 2, 3, and 4, while they have no star, and 4A, are, valuable things for you to know, and for you to use as an overview. I usually do teach them, but teach them rather quickly. Okay, so handout number 2 is an overview of this first goal, understanding and naming emotions. And it says that what we're going to cover in these skills is, what do emotions do for you? In other words, what's the function of emotions? What's the, evolutionarily, or whatever your model is of how human beings came to be human beings, what's the point of emotions? Why do we have them? Second one, what are some of the factors that make it difficult to regulate emotions? So we can sort of break those down and address different factors that make it harder for people. Some people it's harder than others. Third, we're going to go over and this actually will be a starred handout, a model for describing emotions. So there's kind of a flow chart. An emotion happens kind of almost instantaneously, but there are these several components in each of us. And so we're going to spell them out in graphic form so that you can break it down and see, well, what's an emotion consist of? And therefore, what are some of the things we can do to change it? And finally, is ways to describe your emotions, which is going to fit with this model. And so it sort of be, this emotion has this happening in the brain, this happening in the body, this happening in my sense of myself or my sense of the emotion, this happening in the urges that go with it, this happening in my expression of it. So it's sort of like, this is going to be a large, like a dictionary of each of 10 or so emotions, giving a lot of details about that emotion, so someone can go in and find their emotion or find synonyms or spell it out more clearly. Okay? The next handout, number 3, which is what do emotions do for you? Let me just give you an overview of this, because this is very helpful, I think, to teach. And it is, what are the functions of emotions? And let me be clear about something. I'm going to lay out what is kind of the DBT orthodoxy of what are the 3 functions of emotions, and it's more than DBT. This is in the emotion regulation research world. But also remember that with each case, with each patient, with each emotion, You look for individualized functions. So this can cover three broad categories of functions, but when you work with a given patient, you might want to help them find what the function is of their sadness, especially if they devalue their sadness, if they denigrate their sadness, if they have to run away from sadness, or shame. What's the functional value of shame? So what are these three main types or categories of functions? They really are, number one is going to be to motivate for action. The second is going to be to communicate to other people. And the third is going to be to communicate to ourselves. Okay? So motivate for action. These are, another way to motivate for action is more of your cognitive functioning in your cerebral cortex, where you see something like a snake and your brain, based on your memory banks and stuff, can figure out, oops, this might be something to stay away from, and you look at it and you back away, right? On the other hand, when you see a snake and that information travels through your optic nerve, through your eye, to your thalamus, the part of the brain where there's a kind of a triage going on, and it instantaneously, based on memory banks of emergency situations, tells you this is an emergency, and it shoots it right to the thing that activates your autonomic nervous system, your sympathetic nervous system, and your whole emotional apparatus is engaged faster than you can figure it out by looking at the snake and remembering your memory bank. So there's a way in which you're motivated to get out of the way or to move away instantaneously, and that probably has real survival value, of course. And you're motivated by sadness to do certain things that act and that generate a functional response in other people. You might act by crying, by curling up, by withdrawing, by looking sad, in which case you elicit caretaking and comfort. So there's a function there that that's both motivating for action and also communication to others, which then brings about a helpful response. So action, you get motivated for action by, you get angry about something that's blocking one of your most important goals or values, and therefore you work harder at it, you push for it. So that anger motivates you. Shame motivates you to hide or to back off or to stop doing what you're doing, and et cetera, right? So you got that first idea, and of course, if you understand the value of the action, then you realize, well, maybe I should value my emotions rather than just try to get